Hello and welcome to Between the 20s, the official podcast of the Sports Business Association. This is the breakdown of NFL Week 3, or I should say preview of NFL Week 3. I'm Michael Vetter here, joined by Bryce Weisholtz. Bryce, ready for Week 3? How you feeling?
Oh, can't wait for Week 3. Daniel Jones is starting, Mike. Danny
Yes.
Dimes.
Yes, Daniel Jones will be in Giants blue. Not for the first time this season. He did have a bit of an appearance in Week 1, but definitely the starter for the first time ever. How do you feel?
Good. It's bittersweet. It's the start of a new era. I mean, look, I think I probably speak for both of us. I don't remember a time when Eli Manning wasn't under center.
Yes, I definitely don't either.
So it'll be different. Look, it's time for the changing of the guard here in New York. I'm hoping for the best for him.
Yeah, me too. I think I do remember when they had Geno Smith back there for a little while. That was a weird situation though, with the Eli benching a little prematurely. I think it was last year or the year before.
That was terrible. That was Ben McAdoo 2 years ago. It's fine. They sent Ben McAdoo to the pit of misery. It's okay.
Yeah, I think Pat Schumer may be on his tail into the pit of misery.
Oh, I don't know.
It's bad. It's bad for us Giants fans.
It is bad.
Anyway, today for the show, we are going to do a similar show to last week's Week 2 preview. We're going to start with some Week 3 news, then we're going to move on to a review of the results from last week's questions, and then we are going to address some questions from listeners this week. So with that, I'll get started with our first piece of news. Antonio Brown has been released by the New England Patriots amid a series of domestic violence accusations. Bryce, how do you feel?
I mean, I don't know what's going on with this guy. It's been just a parade of character issues ever since he was outed from Pittsburgh. Look, if these accusations are real, good on the Patriots for letting him go. Same thing that the Chiefs did with Kareem Hunt. Does not matter if this guy's a premier talent. What he did is inexcusable. Obviously, fantasy-wise, don't start him.
Yes, definitely don't start him. And for those of you who have him, I'm sorry. I have him in at least one league. Definitely didn't see this coming, this whole onslaught of sort of issue after issue. At least like when it was the helmet stuff, it was at least a bit tolerable. But now, I mean, obviously teams aren't going to put up with this this amount of just. I mean, this is maybe criminal for all we know. Be not a criminal case, but I think a civil suit at least.
Oh, absolutely. He's in for a long and arduous process, and I don't foresee him returning to football this season, or possibly even ever. He's already on the wrong side of 30, so you never know.
But I mean, just from purely a football watcher's perspective, it will be sad, I think, to see him no longer in the league. Just a large level of talent sort of no longer there, which is always unfortunate to see, especially because of just sort of these off the field issues. But obviously, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, and for our second piece of news, came out earlier in the week. We talked about this at the Week 2 recap. Cam Newton dealing with a foot issue. He's officially been ruled out for Sunday's game in Arizona. Kyle Allen, not Will Grier, will start in his place. Mike, how does it make you feel on Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and any other Panther as a result of Cam Newton's injury?
I mean, I think McCaffrey, you have to start obviously in any league. He's still going to get touches. And I think maybe if they feel less confident going down the field with Kyle Allen, they'll rely on CMC in some shorter range situations, which is very beneficial for a PPR league. But even in standard, I think you still have to have CMC plugged in there. RB1, maybe not premier RB1 this week, but absolutely at least mid-tier RB1.
Definitely. McCaffrey's still a lock. I'm going to downgrade Moore and Samuel just a little bit, but not more than maybe other people. Kyle Allen does have some experience in the NFL, and frankly, he has a bit of a big arm too. So not exactly sure what he can do, and until we see it, I'm comfortable starting DJ Moore in some positions. We actually have a question about DJ Moore coming up later in the show too.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else? Any other news you want to bring up?
No, I think that's it. We covered some other stuff. I guess probably one other thing we should mention, the James Conner situation was up in the air. He is going to play tomorrow.
Yes, he is. We're recording this on Saturday night, by the way. We'll get it out for you before football starts on Sunday. So yeah, that's enough of the news. We also talked earlier in the week about Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger. Always got to remember that when deciding whether or not to start your Panthers and Steelers respectively.
Saints and Steelers, Mike.
Saints and Steelers. Oh boy, got stuck on. Wait, you didn't hear about the Drew Brees Cam Newton trade, Bryce?
No, wild. So we're trading injured QB for injured QB.
Oh, well, I think maybe now we should stop spreading false information. But yes, as you said, Saints and Steelers respectively. With that kind of wraps up our news portion. Now we're going to just kind of do something that I think a lot of fantasy podcasts and really just entertainment media in general really don't look at, which is just a review of how did our picks do? How did our hot takes fare? And we're going to make this a weekly part of this segment. But we're going to look over our start sit decisions from last week and see exactly how we did. And if we didn't do well, I think we could just blame it on the randomness of fantasy football.
Oh yeah, it's never on the analyst. It's like when you make it out in baseball, it's the equipment, never the batter. It's always the bat's fault.
Exactly, but when you hit that home run, it's all your talent.
Oh yeah, it's all the work you put in the weight room, all of that, my hand-eye coordination, things like that. Positively, it's on me. Negatively, you just brush it aside. It's the equipment.
Absolutely. Anyway, with question 1 from last week, we had a listener in a half PPR 8-team league. The question was, for a flex position, should they start Tyler Lockett, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, or Matt Breida? Bryce and Amir both picked Tyler Lockett, while I took Joe Mixon. We were all wrong, actually. Matt Breida of the 49ers came through with 13.7 points, leading the pack here. How does that make you feel, B?
A little iffy, just because, yes, Breida did have 13.7 points, but he split carries almost evenly with Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. I'm also not. I don't feel too terrible about my call there, simply because Tyler Lockett did have 12 targets, a lot of yards, 10 receptions, and you said Breida had 13.7. Lockett had 12.9. So we're looking at a 0.8 difference there, almost negligible.
And for those of you keeping track, Joe Mixon had a measly 4.2.
Not his day.
As that is for me to point out. Yeah.
Not his day.
And Stephon Diggs came in with 9.4 points. So you were looking good if you had Breida or Lockett really there in that half PPR league. Moving on to question 2, which was a 12-team PPR league. A listener asked, in their running back 2 spot, should they put David Montgomery, Latavius Murray, Carlos Hyde? Bryce, we all took Latavius Murray, who was the worst of the pack with only 3.3 points. Leading was David Montgomery with 13.8, and in second was Carlos Hyde with 9 flat.
This one I'm going to chalk up to the randomness of the NFL. Latavius Murray didn't get his touches last week because Drew Brees went down and they fell so far behind. The Saints lost this game 27-9. They're going to play Alvin Kamara when they're down by that much, particularly using Kamara as a safety net when they have a backup quarterback in there, Teddy Bridgewater or Taysom Hill. And Brees got hurt in the first quarter. Murray had no time to do anything really. So the fact that he put up 3.3, I think is a testament to how well he ran the ball. But the other thing is just, I feel vindicated now for David Montgomery. The man got the lion's share of the carries. He grinded out many, many yards, had a solid 1-yard touchdown. I mean, looking at the volume, this is what I was hoping for. And I think he's an RB2 now because he's only going to go up from here, particularly against Washington on Monday night.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said. It's always very frustrating sort of when you make these lineup decisions and it really just comes down to somebody got injured and it really wasn't sort of your take on the game. And it's just sort of, as you said, some kind of randomness that really decided it.
Yeah,
it was totally out of your control.
That hurts. I was playing in a league last week, or in one of my leagues last week. Poor guy had Alshon Jeffrey and David Njoku. So he put up 2 goose eggs because of first quarter injuries. It was tough. Fortunate for me, but tough for the other guy.
Oof. Anyway, moving on to our third question, which was asked by a listener in a 12-team half PPR league. They were looking for someone to fill their flex position, and they inquired about 6 players here, so bear with me, as you did last week. Kenyon Drake, Phillip Lindsay, Tariq Cohen, Corey Davis, John Brown, Danny Amendola. Bryce and Amer both took who eventually became the high scorer, John Brown, while I picked the goose egg in the group, Danny Amendola. Apparently, I was playing the wrong game. Everyone else was obviously between that 0 and 10.7 points. Kenyon Drake had 7.3 points. Philip Lindsay had 8.6. Tariq Cohen with 3.5, and Corey Davis with 5.3.
The main thing here for me, Mike, is just none of these options were very good last week. So this was a tough situation to be in regardless. Philip Lindsay, 8.6, is almost a miracle given the way they use Royce Freeman, the way that game was going. Again, the fact that he put up 8.6 also is probably a good sign because he was going up against that Chicago Bear defensive front, which is one of the best maybe ever. John Brown, I was happy that he did put up double-digit points. Yes, it was against the Giants, but clearly Josh Allen is looking to target him from here on out.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. I think still to be seen, though, for Lindsay owners is sort of how that backfield is going to work itself out, though. I think that was basically equal opportunity backfield last week, even though I think Lindsay did the best there last week, B?
I think so. Royce Freeman got similar touches, but he also didn't punch it into the end zone. Just tough day out there for Broncos.
Yeah, definitely. With the fourth question, a listener in a 10-team league asked about the tight end position, and I should say this league was standard as well. Mark Andrews, David Njoku. If you made the wrong choice here, you cost yourself a lot of points. Luckily, all of us picked Mark Andrews, who put up 17.2, but as you mentioned before, David Njoku with a goose egg due to a first quarter injury.
Not sure what it mattered, Mike. I mean, obviously, we hope David Njoku can make a quick recovery. I think his target is week 8. He's a similar injury to Nick Foles, both in the head, clavicle, neck area. Nick Foles just came out that his target is week 12, which for Jags fans, that's okay because the legend of Gardner Minshew is just starting to grow. If you watch that Thursday night game, he was electric. That's a story for another day. But I'm not sure that would have mattered. Mark Andrews is the top target for Lamar Jackson, up there with Marquise Brown. David Njoku is the third option on that team. It stinks that he got hurt. Mark Andrews is absolutely a tight end 1 moving forward.
Do you know what Gardner Minshew said to his dad after he left the house for college?
Do I want to know?
You're the man of the house now.
Oh, God. I saw that on Facebook.
I know, that was a pretty good meme, actually.
Did you see the shot of Minshew's dad? He looks like John Gruden on steroids. He is quickly going to endear himself to fans in Jacksonville and around the NFL. That guy he's a character. I mean, there's stories. I would recommend going to just on any sports publication looking for the Gardner Minshew college stories. This guy is on another planet.
Yeah, Gardner Minshew, what a guy. Anyway, with our fifth question here, a listener in a 10-team PPR league asked for a wide receiver 2 spot. They gave us 2 options, Jarvis Landry or Stephon Diggs. Amer took Diggs, and Bryce, you and I went down by taking Landry. Diggs put up 9.9 points, Landry with 6.2.
This, to me, is deceptive. Stephon Diggs had 1 reception, and it just so happened to go for a touchdown. That's the only reason he's up there. He did, however, have another touchdown called back on a phantom PI call on Dalvin Cook. But Diggs did drop 4 or 5 other passes, so this could have been a much wider disparity. Jarvis Landry, even with Odell, is still getting his targets. So thinking back to the way these games went, if you told me that Stephon Diggs was only going to get 1 catch and Jarvis Landry was going to get his, I believe it was 3 or 4, I would have picked Jarvis Landry every time. And going back, even knowing what I do now, I think I still would pick Jarvis Landry moving forward.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. When making these decisions, you're really looking sort of at opportunity. And in fantasy football in general, I think it's a very interesting game because opportunity can really win out over talent. which makes it very difficult week over week to make these sort of decisions. But as you said, sort of Landry here had the better opportunity, but Diggs did get in the end zone for that touchdown.
Yep. This week, hopefully, it's going to be a different story. Minnesota is playing a beat-up Oakland secondary and a bad Oakland team. So hopefully Stephon Diggs will get some more production. A lot of that will come down to him, though. He had 3 or 4 drops last week on 7 targets. If he can reel those in, he'll start to become more fantasy relevant. And this is a good week to do it.
I think Vikings owners would like to see them focus on the passing game a bit more as well. I know Kirk Cousins in week 1 was had less than 100 yards, and I think last week not too many more.
I disagree. I have Dalvin Cook in multiple leagues. I want him to keep doing what they're doing. He's been incredible. He hasn't logged – I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, but he's looked spectacular, Mike.
No, definitely. Last week he put up big numbers, 20 points, I think in standard leagues and some PPR leagues, I think up to 30, depending on how your bonuses worked out. But big week for sure for Dalvin Cook. And I think Dalvin Cook owners are very pleased with what they're getting right now, that sort of second round value.
Absolutely.
All right, with that, we're going to enter into this week's portion of what we call Start Sit here, where we really address listener questions on week 3 and how they should feel about playing certain players on their rosters in week 3. So, Bryce, you have the first question for us.
Yes, question 1 is an RB2 question in a 10-team standard league. Can I trust James Conner in my RB2 this week, or should I go with David Montgomery? We do know that James Conner is coming off a bit of an injury, but is going to play this week. But bigger news, Ben Roethlisberger is out. Pittsburgh has a favorable matchup this week, but David Montgomery looked pretty good. Mike, what do you think?
And you should say, I think Pittsburgh is playing the 49ers, and the Bears are playing the Redskins this week. So with that in mind, I think RB2, you have to still look at James Conner. I mean, with Ben Roethlisberger out, Conner has to get more touches, I think, at least in the running game. Maybe in the passing game might be a little less electric. And I think the concern really isn't the touches, though, because Conner's going to be facing a lot of stacked boxes just because now they don't have that dynamic passer in Ben Roethlisberger. But I still just think that Conner will get the opportunity in that offense as opposed to David Montgomery, who still, I think you saw last week as sort of solving the running back situation in Chicago. I still think that Tariq Cohen is a very good option in the passing downs and takes away a lot of the value for Montgomery, especially this week going up against the Redskins. I think both these defenses are really comparable, but I have to give this edge to Conner here.
Mike, there's a phrase in hockey called risk it for the biscuit. You won't get anywhere without taking some risk. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pick David Montgomery. You mentioned it, I saw last week as a breakout party. The Bears, I think, are going to absolutely demolish the Redskins on Monday night. So game script will favor David Montgomery. They gave him 18 rushes and then a couple more targets. I think he had 1 reception last week against the Broncos. Broncos aren't a bad defensive front either. If he put up 65 yards on 18 carries, imagine what he can do against a bad Redskin defense. James Conner is coming off an injury, which scares me. Mason Rudolph is there too, who I actually happen to like. He threw a 40-yard bomb to JuJu Smith-Schuster last week. So I actually liked what I saw out of Rudolph. But to me, I'm going to take a chance here, and I think David Montgomery is going to have a better week.
Risking it for the biscuit. I like it, B. I definitely see your thought process there. I do think this one's pretty close. But I mean, geez, to think, once again, you got to, in fantasy, just kind of go back and kick yourself. To think that in the draft, you'd have a week where David Montgomery has the potential to be better than James Conner. Very frustrating. Very frustrating if you took James Conner.
Oh, definitely. I have a league where I took James Conner in the first round, and I am considering – I actually have a league that's a very similar situation where I have a top-tier RB2 on my bench, and James Conner was my RB1, and Dalvin Cook is my RB2. I went Conner Cook back-to-back. And I'm considering leaving Conner on the bench for Montgomery. And as per my advice right now, I think I will go do that. But that's PPR, so it's a little different.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, moving on to our second question, which is a listener in a 12-team PPR league. They're concerned with the team down in Carolina. They asked that with Cam Newton out, is DJ Moore startable as a wide receiver too? And do you want to qualify this the point total be? What do you think a wide receiver two sort of caliber is?
What I was thinking is here it's going to be how we'll score this is does he score wide receiver 24 this week or better? Because wide
Okay.
receiver 24 is going to be through all the wide receiver twos this week.
Okay, I like that thought process. So, what's your take?
I think so. Again, they're going to have to throw to someone. DJ Moore has proven to be more reliable than Curtis Samuel, albeit Greg Olson's probably more of a safety net than DJ Moore is, just on pedigree alone, as is Christian McCaffrey. If you drafted DJ Moore as your wide receiver 2, that probably means you don't have a high for wide receiver 3 if DJ Moore is your starter. I drafted him mostly as a flex play. I think he is startable there. It is going to depend on your bench a little bit. It would be helpful to know who was on this listener's bench. But Kyle Allen is not as bad as some people think. He was performing very admirably with a subpar version of Cam Newton. Obviously, I would take a subpar Cam Newton over a fully healthy Kyle Allen any day. But I think he'll be around that wide receiver 20 range in a PPR format.
Yeah, so I think DJ Moore, according to Fantasy Pros, in a PPR format is the 27th best receiver in terms of total points thus far. So we are right around that range. You have to consider a few things, I think, then, in addition to that. They are going up against the Arizona Cardinals, which I think is a big plus for Moore.
Yep.
But, I mean, in at quarterback is not Cam Newton, which I think is a bit of a detraction. Still, I'm going to have to agree with you and say that DJ Moore does score wide receiver 24 points or better, just because they're going up against that Cardinals defense. And he has shown that he is pretty reliable in that role. So I'm going to say wide receiver 24. But I think something we should discuss here is boom bust potential as well. Do you see a boom bust, either one of them likely, or do you see him right around this wide receiver 24 position, sort of no matter what? Wide receiver 24, wide receiver 30 sort of range, no matter what.
So, Mike, I'm going to flip this to something that you usually say. Both boom and bust are tail outcomes. Those are going to be very, very infrequent. I don't see the potential for him to boom this week. I do see the potential for him to bust. For me, a boom would be wide receiver 15 or better. I don't see that. I think it's much more likely he'll bust wide receiver 35 or below, right? So we're thinking another 10 or so spots on either side. I see him as I don't think he'll boom or bust just because I personally actually think the Cardinals are going to have their own breakout party this week. Kyler's going to take over this league, or at least this game. David Johnson's going to have a good week. And game script is, I think, going to favor the pass. So just on volume, he'll be able to stay. But I don't think he'll boom. He'll more likely bust if he's on one of those two ends.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. But like you said, they are both tail outcomes for sure. So I do think somewhere in the middle is probably the most reliable. And I think this wide receiver 24 question is very hard because that's right around where I'd say I see him finishing. But sort of in Vegas, those are the questions you have to answer. It's always the over-under or this line is going to be right around where you think. Yep. But it's on you to pick which side you like better.
Definitely. So that was the DJ Moore question that we alluded to earlier in the show. Now we have our third question for the second week in a row. We have a tight ends question. This one, Mike, I think is pretty interesting. Question 3 here is from a 12-team PPR, so same format as the last league. At tight end this week, O.J. Howard, who's been probably the biggest bust in football, not named Baker Mayfield fantasy-wise, going up against the New York Giants. Austin Hooper, who is a not sexy but reliable tight end, going up against Indianapolis. Or, what I'm going to assume here is a waiver wire pickup, Jared Cook with Teddy Bridgewater under center in New Orleans for the Saints. Should this listener go O.J. Howard, Austin Hooper, or Jared Cook at their tight end spot?
So I'm going to rule out Cook. The Saints are going up against the Seahawks. You do have Bridgewater in there at QB. And I just think that he's not as great of an option even before you consider those factors. So with those factors in play, I definitely think you're looking at either Howard or Hooper. We have Howard going up against the Giants this week. For basically anyone that is a favorable matchup, you have to think about game script. I think at least a little bit in that the Bucks may not be passing a lot if they take an early lead against the Giants, as both the Bills and the Cowboys have done. Then you have the Falcons going up against the Colts. Similar issue probably there for the Falcons, or for Hooper, I should say, on the Falcons, because the Falcons may take a relatively large lead against the Colts. So kind of very similar options here for both Howard and Hooper. And as we know, their value is relatively similar in both leagues. I'm going to go Hooper for this one, just because he has shown a little bit more production this year. Howard put up that big goose egg last week, which always scares me from a fantasy perspective. So I'm going to side with the Falcons tight end Hooper.
I agree with you, Mike. I'm going to go with Austin Hooper. He's just a safer bet. I think O.J. Howard has a greater potential to boom this week because he is playing the Giants. But along that same vein, I think it's more likely that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are going to boom too. What scares me is the red zone usage. Cameron Brate is running the tight end red zone routes for the Buccaneers and not O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard is being used more like a blocker than a receiver, which is not how he was being used last year. Some people thought this was going to happen with Bruce Arians taking over the reins in Tampa Bay. He doesn't tend to target tight ends. I chose to disregard that. That is looking like a mistake.
Maybe a bad decision.
That's not looking too good now. But I would go Austin Hooper too. He's just a little bit of a safer bet. And when you're talking about tight end, I'd rather take a guy who, in PPR anyway, I'm pretty sure is going to put up at least 7 points than a guy that's going to have a huge variance, could boom for 20, or could put up a goose egg like he did last week. And yes, I too am going to rule out Jared Cook.
So that's, I think, both of us taking Hooper there. Now we have question 4, which comes from a listener in a 10-team standard league. They ask for their wide receiver 2 this week. Should they have JuJu Smith-Schuster, whose Steelers are going up against the 49ers, or Cooper Kupp, whose Rams are going up against the Browns?
Cooper Kupp had a great week last week. He broke off, Mike, I don't know if you saw it, that huge slant and go, just burned through the entire Saints secondary. But still, to me, I think this is a no-brainer, and you go JuJu Smith-Schuster. As I mentioned, Mason Rudolph looked pretty good. He threw that beautiful downfield pass to JuJu earlier in the week, dropped it right in the breadbasket for him. I think Rudolph is better than people give him credit for, simply because he hasn't played that much, which obviously skepticism in fantasy football is a good thing to have. JuJu, his talent is too good, and there are too many mouths to feed in Los Angeles to make me feel confident enough that Cooper Kupp is going to outscore JuJu Smith-Schuster. It can certainly happen. It did happen last week. But with a full week of preparation for Mason Rudolph, JuJu, I think, is going to outscore Cooper Kupp this week. But if you have a flex spot, absolutely play Cooper Kupp in your flex spot there.
Yeah, this is also a tough one. Cooper Kupp is the 32nd best receiver in standard league so far, and JuJu Smith-Schuster is only the 37th. I think I'm going to go Kupp here just because I questioned the ability for the Steelers to move the ball. I know you like Mason Rudolph a lot, and I mean move the ball in the passing game. I know you like Mason Rudolph a lot, but I just think that there's a big question there. Kupp has been really productive. As you said last week, he had a really great game, and he does seem to be emerging as maybe the top receiver out there, especially over Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods. So with that, I'm going to go Kupp. But I think both of these are really good options. I do think Kupp's ceiling is a little higher at this spot because the Rams just have that potential to absolutely to really pull off a lot of scores this coming week in week 3. I don't think the Steelers necessarily have that same offensive potential this week just because Mason Rudolph's in there. I don't see. I'm not as high on the Steelers this week as I am on the Rams. But as always, you're wondering exactly how much of that production will be Cooper Kupp's in the passing game.
Yeah, the Rams do have that ability. What scares me a little bit about JuJu is Mason Rudolph and James Washington played together at Oklahoma State. Washington was Rudolph's number 1 target there. They have great chemistry together. So James Washington might boom and become what JuJu was last year, that incredibly high floor wide receiver 2, moving forward with Big Ben out for the year. I just think that JuJu's talent is too good to pass up in favor of a guy whose target share is variable week to week, even in a good matchup for the Rams.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Anything else to mention, B, before we wrap up here?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered most of it. Hit you with the news. We got some listener questions answered, and next week we'll have our standings for how we did both in week 2 and week 3.
Yes, definitely. Anyway, with that, we hope that all of our listeners out there have a great week 3 in the NFL. Hope your fantasy football teams are able to pull out a victory in what has been already a tumultuous season so far for a lot of fantasy owners. From Bryce and myself, wish you the best in week 3 and hope to see you back here in our week 3 wrap up next week.